Yo, what is up, everybody? My name is Chandler Molyneux, and welcome into the Act First show, where we help online coaches make sales simple. All right, so as you guys know, this is a very viral topic, 100 men versus one gorilla. Who would win? I'm not really gonna answer that question. However, I do think that 100 men would beat one gorilla. And as a sales coach, I want to sell you on the fact that 100 men would beat one gorilla. And I'm gonna do that by controlling the frame. And at the end of the video, once I show you how I would actually sell somebody on this theory that 100 men would beat one gorilla, I'll explain the framework that I used and how you can use this to really solve any objection that you get on a sales call. So without further ado, as you guys know, always have my handy dandy notebook here, and we're gonna break this all down. All right, so the first thing that I would wanna do if I was having a conversation with somebody about 100 men versus one gorilla, and if they believed that one gorilla would beat 100 men, I would wanna ask a clarity question. All right, so that clarity question would be really simple. It would be, hey, so fill me in. I just wanna know, I'm kind of curious, what leads you to believe that one gorilla would beat 100 men? All right, so very simply, I just want to hear their argument. I want to hear their stance. All right, then from there, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to agree with their points, and then I'm gonna ask a reframe question. All right, and the reframe question is to change their perspective, right? To get them to think a different way. All right, so basically, clarity question, right? So just so I know, just so I have the information, what leads you to believe that one gorilla can beat 100 men? Then I would agree. I would say, look, I get it. One gorilla is 10 times stronger. It runs 25 miles an hour. It has a bite force that is greater than a lion. And quite honestly, if it faced 100 men, it probably would kill 20 to 40 of those men. But let me ask you a question. Are you envisioning that each man is going to fight this gorilla 1v1? Or are you envisioning 100 men charging this gorilla at once? All right, so that's the reframe question. All right, so in this particular circumstance, the person may be thinking that 100 men are gonna fight this gorilla and that each man is gonna square up with the gorilla like this, and the gorilla is gonna square up with the man like this, and they're gonna have a boxing match, and they're just gonna run through 100 men. If that's the case, then yeah, sure, the gorilla may win, the gorilla may not win, but they're probably not thinking about it as 100 men charging this gorilla at once, right? So I'm reframing, I'm changing the perspective. Okay, and I'm laying the foundation for my argument that if 100 men charged a gorilla, one singular gorilla at once, that the gorilla probably wouldn't win. Okay, so I just reframed. I set the foundation for my argument. I changed the perspective. Okay, so now what I want to do from here is I want to ask a couple of softball questions, right? A couple of a soft agreement questions, where basically I'm going to get him or her to agree to a couple of these softball questions before I hit them with my closing argument. Okay, so agreement question number one. All right, wouldn't you agree that if 15 men charged this gorilla and grabbed this gorilla's leg or jumped on this gorilla's back, even 15 men would likely overwhelm that gorilla? Would you agree with that? Right, so softball question, if 15 men grabbed onto a gorilla's leg or if 15 men jumped onto a gorilla's back, that the gorilla would probably have a hard time with that. That's a pretty fair statement, wouldn't you say? Right, so that's one agreement question. Okay, so my frame is set. So my frame is already set. Now I'm asking the next agreement question, right? And I'm upping the ante. So I'm making each agreement question more agreeable, right? So now I would say, now imagine 100 men charging this gorilla from all different angles. Don't you think that the gorilla is not going to fight the same way? Don't you think that the gorilla is going to be confused? We have 100 men charging this gorilla from different angles. Don't you think that the gorilla is not going to fight the same way? Right? So now I have two softball questions answered. I got a yes, I got a yes, okay? So now I'm going to hit them with my third agreement question, right? I would say probably not, right? that gorilla is probably not going to fight the same way. So isn't it fair to say that 100 men, if 100 men put their minds together, right? Because that's one of the strategic advantages that men have. It's why we've been at the top of the food chain for so long, is we can use our brain. Wouldn't you agree that if 100 men can put their mind together, that they would outwit a gorilla, even if that gorilla is 10 times stronger than the men? Wouldn't you agree with that? Right? So another agreement, right? So all these agreement questions are stacking, right? It's stacking my frame, right? It's building my base to my argument, right? And they're each separate points, and now I can hit them with my closing argument, right? And my closing argument brings it all together. So basically I would say, amazing. And can we also agree that yes, this gorilla is an absolute savage, but 100 men charging this gorilla at once would be too much. It would overwhelm the gorilla, maybe even would exhaust the gorilla, and ultimately it would lose the battle, right? So they would say yes to that, and then I would win the argument. I would overcome the objection. All right, so basically, what the heck did I do here, right? How can you actually use this in a real, sales call application? So the framework is really simple. It's not a complex framework to understand, right? It's basically changing somebody's perspective on something, asking 2 to 3 softball agreement questions, and then closing them by summing it all up, all right? So I want to give you another example. This example is going to be time, all right? I don't have time. All right, so basically if somebody said that they don't have time, right, I need to change their perspective. They're probably thinking like, well, I got this chore and I got that and I got kids and I got this responsibility, right? They're so bogged down by the responsibilities that they're not seeing the bigger picture here. And the bigger picture here, and you'll see this in my example in just a second, is that the thing that they need to accomplish is probably more important than some of their responsibilities. Right? So if they say, hey, I don't have time, I'm really busy, I got work, I got kids, I got this, I got that, blah, 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 blah. But this person needs to lose 100 pounds, right? I would say, hey, I get that you're busy, we all are, but wouldn't you agree that losing this 100 pounds is more important than some of the responsibilities that you're spending time on right now? Right? This is it's a question that obviously they're gonna say yes to, right? If doing the dishes and vacuuming their house and cutting the lawn is some of their responsibilities, losing 100 pounds is going to provide them a lot more value than those responsibilities, right? So I reset the frame. I changed the perspective. I got them to think in a different way. Well, yeah, actually it is more important, and maybe I'm not spending my time in the best way, right? So now I'm going to ask them 2 to 3 softball agreement questions, okay? So one of those agreement questions would be, okay, amazing. And would you agree that spending time on losing this 100 pounds would probably have more of a significant impact on your life and your family than, cutting the grass and doing the household chores? Yeah, Chad, I would agree with that, right? So now I have a couple of yeses under my belt. So now I'm going to hit them with my final agreement question, which is also my close. Well, technically the close. It at least gets I'll explain. Let me give you the example and then I'll explain, right? So they would say yes to that. And then I would say, awesome, okay, cool. So if I had a way where, I'm not taking time away from the things that are really important from you, but I can adjust the program so that it's appropriate for the amount of time that you can put in to accomplish this goal, would you get resourceful with your time so we could figure out a solution to this? All right, now they say yes to that, and now we're on the same side of the table. We can solve this problem together, and then I can close the deal. And if you're curious how I would solve that problem is I would say, all right, cool. So let's do it this way. All right, so we need roughly this amount of time for working out. If you don't want to go to the gym, you'd rather work out at home, we could do 15 to 20 minute workouts. That's about 1 to 2 hours of working out a week. We probably need maybe 30 minutes for meal prep. I'm just making up numbers. So in total, we probably need about 2.5 hours a week to successfully lose 1 pound a week. Now you have a long way to go, 100 pounds, we probably have to commit to a year, but at least we have a game plan to accomplish the goal. Do you feel confident you can find 2.5 hours a week? Okay, you don't feel that confident? All right, well, hey, let's go through the list. Let's list out all the things you're spending time on. Okay, you're spending 2 hours with your friends at a bar. right? Like, do you think that, you know, asking the question again, spending that 2 hours on losing the 100 pounds is going to have more of a positive impact on your life than spending 2 hours a week with the boys at the bar? Would you agree? Is that a fair statement? Okay, awesome. For this time duration, so we can accomplish this goal, are you willing to make that sacrifice? You are? That's what I love to hear, man. Are we committing to this? That's pretty much how I would play it out, right? But coming back to the framework here, it's very simple. You could do this with any objection. You set the frame, which basically means, right, it's a fancy sales term, set the frame, right? I'm basically changing their perspective. I'm changing a negative belief into a positive belief, getting them to see their problem in a different way, asking 2 to 3 softball questions that pretty much guarantee that you're going to get a yes. And then I summarize my arguments for the closing point. All right, now, short video, very, very helpful. If you can master this framework of change perspective, 2 to 3 softball questions, close the deal, I promise it's gonna help you in the long run. All right, y'all. That's solving the 100 men versus 1 gorilla. If you guys enjoy this, you guys know what to do. We make sales simple here for online coaches. If that is content that you're looking for, make sure you hit the subscribe button, leave a thumbs up. And also, I would love to hear your perspective. What do you think would win, 100 men or a gorilla? Let me know in the comment section down below. I'll chat with you guys soon. Peace.